Reliance is up 4% on that KG-D6 gas development. Where do you guys stand on that name?
Well, we believe that the stock is sideways. We don't see major upside on the stock right now. I would think that this is not going to be a big driver to the index, at least for the next 3 to 6 months. So we have some news flow coming through, but on a fundamental basis, we would think this is fully priced.
You track flows quite closely. What do you think the recent moves from Japan, etc., could mean in terms of ramifications for the kind of money which has been coming in over the last 5 to 6 weeks?
Well, I think money from Japan can make a big difference to total flows. In terms of flows which can come in, even a 1% kind of a flow from the total investments of Japan, which are in the region of 1.6 trillion, would be in the region of over $100 million. So it's a big thing in terms of what India can get. How much we get finally depends upon a whole host of factors which are specific to India. But yes, India, as far as Japan is concerned, India can be a huge recipient of flows. We'll have to wait and see. We have seen that happen at times. We saw that happening in 2007. Let's wait and see how much we actually end up getting for 2013.
This process of the market rallying and attracting so much by way of flows, though, Sandeep, increased confidence that perhaps the downside risk for us had become more limited. What would you say it's still present at going into the second half of the year?
Well, actually, downside risk for India is all self-created. We have seen that happen for the last 4 years. So, can we create a further downside risk? Of course, yes. So, how much can flows help you? How much can the tide help you if you are intent on sinking and drowning? So that's it. I mean, I would think that India has favorable tailwind in terms of global liquidity, but India's macro continues to remain weak. People get overtly negative at times and say that nothing can move, and we got surprised last month when we saw the kind of flows, just because it seems that the government is doing something. Let's hope that that kind of a situation, tepid reaction by the government and flows continue. I think anything to expect anything fundamentally to change in the next 6 to 18 months would be asking for a lot.
Yeah, intent on sinking doesn't sound very hopeful, Sandeep, but amongst these banking stocks that you guys are discussing, I imagine there's quite a bit of debate about the NBFCs, especially some of the gold NBFCs and the kind of price damage that they've seen. How are people approaching that pocket, and how are you guys feeling about that kind of space?
Gold NBFCs were seen to be the safest bet in terms of the fact that they always have security which seems to hold value and go up in value over time. Clearly, that's not the case. I think my experience in the markets for the last 20 years has shown that anything that cannot happen will happen, and which has happened with NBFCs, where gold prices have fallen, and therefore it showed up as the fact that this kind of lending, aggressive growth quarter after quarter, year on year, cannot be sustained in the scenario of falling gold prices. So clearly there is a reevaluation of the business model of these NBFCs, and now it is for those companies to show that they can go through a tough time. The reason why the likes of HDFC Bank or HDFC get the kind of valuations they do is because they have gone through long phases of negative and positive macro cycles. I don't think that's the case for NBFC. So we think that I think investors should evaluate this phase very carefully and see whether there are any longer-term structural sound business models that this business has thrown up.
Do you see new banking licenses being a trigger for any of these high-quality NBFCs at all? Because the latest one was JM Finance, which went up sharply because of some corporate news flow. In the next 6 to 9 months, do you see that as a trigger at all?
There is triggers in terms of news flows. If and when that happens, there would be definitely a benefit to the parent of to a listed parent of that business. It's impossible to speculate, whether this will be structural or just short term. But I would think that any kind of news flow based uptick in any stock price goes through a process of re-evaluation quickly, and then we see things stabilize. So I would think the same would happen.
Have you started becoming incrementally positive on any of these spaces like Tata Steel, Sandeep, where numbers were good this time, or do you think it will still continue to frustrate investors?
I think for the entire metal sector and Tata Steel also, we have to see fundamental macro changes in the global economy, which will take time in my view. And if there are any specific corporate action in terms of restructuring and sell-off, and debt burden on the balance sheet reducing, that would trigger some kind of revaluation. But I think in terms of operations, it's going to be a very long haul.
Conversely, have you turned cautious on the pharmaceutical sector, Sandeep? Last week was dotted with negative news for many of these stocks.
I think the regulatory environment in the US is not going to be favorable for Indian and emerging market pharma businesses. I think the US is re-evaluating its entire regulatory process and whether they really have the capacity to audit these businesses in terms of their production processes. I think this is also a wake-up call for most Indian businesses which need to tighten up. I think India will continue to remain as one of the largest suppliers of generic medicines globally. That we have seen kind of positive impact on the Supreme Court judgment on the anti-cancer drug. So, to come straight to the point, I think Indian businesses which are able to, demonstrate compliance with international global regulatory regimes will have significant business opportunities. We just have, and I think the Indian businesses will come around to that. So, I would remain positive on the pharma sector.
Just to go back to that point about liquidity, Sandeep, what's your sense of what the ETFs are up to? Because they're probably hurting both with what's happened with the currency, and by the end of May, or at least up until this point, we haven't really generated too much for ourselves again year to date.
I think flows into ETFs have got muted a bit, but we'll have to wait and see if this trend reverses. I think as far as global flows are concerned, as long as that macro environment remains positive, liquidity is sloshing around the world and it will find its way into India too. That's the basic assumption that one has to operate with, whether it comes in the form of ETFs or in terms of hedge funds making bets, or also long only active fund managers. We will see how that really plays out. But I think as long as the broader macro liquidity environment remains positive, India will see flows.
What about the domestic liquidity, Sandeep? What have your observations been for the last few weeks from that front?
No, there's no let up there. I think, while there have been some portfolio churning, I think the macro environment on that still remains very challenging. So, as far as domestic fund managers are concerned, they don't have the tailwind which the global liquidity and macro overseas is providing for asset managers.
Sandeep, have a good conference. Thank you very much for taking time out today.